Are the Assyrians, the Assyrian Christians, are they the descendants of the 10 lost tribes? Well, that's what Asahel Grant believed. He wrote this book called The Nestorians, or The Lost Tribes. And the setting of this book, I believe he died around the year 1840, so it's kind of amazing. He was a medical missionary, and he befriended the Assyrian Church of the East, the patriarch, the entire community. So he went these missions to them to assist and aid that community. And he wrote this book. Now, recently, a biography has been written about him. He's quite an adventurer, exposing himself to great dangers for the love of the Assyrian people, but also for the love of the Lord. I believe he lost his wife, his daughters, and he himself treating people. I think he contracted typhus and he died. So he put his life on the line for God's truth, for the gospel, out of love for the Assyrian people. And he passed away, but he's a great adventure, but also it's very historically significant. So the first part of this book is basically an account of his some of his adventures among the Assyrian people. It's very insightful, talking about the Kurds as, basically as highwaymen and bandits and thieves and murderers at that time. And he calls the Assyrians, usually calls them the independent Nestorians, because they had de facto, at this time they had de facto independence. So they would have been seen as, I guess, under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, but the Ottomans weren't really able to exercise authority or control because of different reasons, but also the terrain in which they lived. So the first part of this book, is an account of his adventures, but then he tries to argue that the Assyrian people today are the descendants of the 10 lost tribes. The 10 lost tribes. And he claims that at the time, the Assyrians claimed to be the descendants of the 10 lost tribes. And he mentions that the Jews and the Assyrians, because there's a lot of Jewish people live in that area at that time, there's still Jews from Assyria to this day. I have a couple of books in the back. There's Assyria and Nineveh. I'm going to talk about this at a later time. My Father's Paradise and Assyria and Nineveh are two books. They're written by basically Jewish Assyrians. But what Asahel Grant says is that these two communities live in friction. They don't really like each other very well, the Jews of that region and the Assyrian people. But they both acknowledge that the Assyrians were descended from the 10 lost tribes. So who or what are the 10 lost tribes?
Jesus was an Aramaic-speaking Jew of the Middle East, and the Assyrians are Aramaic-speaking Christians in the Middle East who have endured persecution for over 1,000 years. Join Voice of the Word Aramaic Bible teacher, artist, and author Stephen Missick as he examines the Bible through the ancient languages, peoples, lands, cultures, and times in which it was first revealed. Research the Scriptures, rescue persecuted Christians, and restore the Church to its Semitic roots. And now, Voice of the Word.
So, the three main tribes, which in the end was Judah, where we get the word Jew from, Benjamin, and Paul the Apostle claimed to be from the tribe of Benjamin, and Levi, that's the priestly tribe. These three tribes never vanished. I don't know if people really know if they're from Benjamin or Judah anymore. They kind of just, I guess, it was subsumed, right? Benjamin subsumed. They're just all Jews now because you had the kingdom of Judah. So what had happened, if you know the story of the Bible, we have Isaac, and Isaac has a son named Jacob. Jacob's name is changed to Israel. He has 12 sons, and each of these sons becomes the patriarch or the head of a tribe. So you have the 12 tribes of Israel. And during the time of the judges, you have a very loose tribal confederation. They're probably just independent, principalities or whatever. But there's awareness that we're all Israelites, even though you had, Ephraim, Manasseh, Gad, Judah. They saw themselves as distinct people, but they're all Israelites, right? So what happens is King David, well, first it's King Saul, but then David unifies the 12 tribes under his rule, and then we have King Solomon. For a brief time, you had a I guess it would be a mini empire, right? The empire of King Solomon. But after Solomon dies, his son Rehoboam is not powerful or strong enough to keep the kingdom together, so it divides, and you have two kingdoms that arise: the kingdom of Israel to the north, of the 10 tribes to the north, and the remaining tribes to the south. They're dominated by the tribe of Judah, hence the word Jew. Up in the north, the dominant tribe is Ephraim. So sometimes the Bible talks about, as a blanket term for Israel, you have Ephraim, and in the south you have Judah. But there's actually, Judah had Simeon, Benjamin, and Levi in that area, and up north we have the rest of the tribes. So the Assyrians came in and they defeated the northern tribes, the 10 northern tribes, and they took them into exile. They exiled the entire nation into Syria, to Assyria, that region. They're taken in captivity to Assyria. So then the Assyrian Empire fails or falls, and then the Babylonian Empire arises, and the Babylonians come, and basically in the end, the Babylonians it seems like they try to work things out, but the tribe of Judah keeps on rebelling, and finally they exile the tribe of Judah to Babylonia. Very few people are left, just the poorest of the poor, and then you have the people who stay behind out of fear of the Babylonian Empire, repercussions for their revolts. They flee into Egypt. So what happens is, under Ezra, Nehemiah, and others, after the Babylonian Empire falls and we have the Persian Empire, Ezra, Nehemiah, and others get some of the Jews to return back after 50 to 70 years, to return back and reestablish themselves in their ancestral homeland, right? But the 10 northern tribes never had an Ezra and Nehemiah. So there was nobody that came and gathered those people together, at least some of them, and brought them back to their homeland. That never happened. So what happened to these people? Now you have the Samaritans. The Bible mentions that the Assyrians resettled the places which had been depopulated when they took all these are Israelites technically, to Assyria. But we have the Samaritans today. There's only 1,000 of them left, and they claim to be the Israelite Samaritans, that they're the descendants of the Israelites of old. From the Jewish perspective, the Jews looked upon and we see this in the New Testament, the conflict between the Jews and the Samaritan, also in the writings of Josephus, where the Samaritans view themselves as Israelites, but the Jews, the Judeans, they view the Samaritans as a mongrel race, as Assyrian settlers who intermarried with the Israelites. And they didn't look at their religion as authentic, even though the Samaritans to this day still go according to the Torah. The Jews don't acknowledge that as a legitimate form of the ancient Israelite religion. Of course, I think the way the Samaritans look at it is, they say we're the Israelite Samaritans and the Jews the Israelite Jews. They don't receive. I think the Torah is their Bible. I think they use the book of Joshua, but the rest of the Old Testament scriptures are not acknowledged as authoritative or canonical by the Samaritans. So you have this concept that the Bible actually describes where in Mesopotamia the 10 lost tribes were settled. But what happened is they disappear from history, and there's all kinds of speculation, sometimes very imaginative, what happened to the 10 lost tribes. And something kind of offends me. I'm very concerned. It's like before, a lot of evangelicals just have an obsession, a pro-Israel obsession, and they'll support Israel no matter what, it seems like. Now because it's Qatar, it's the Gulf Arabs giving money to Qatar. The Gulf Arabs are trying to introduce anti-Semitism into a community that used to not be anti-Semite, and now you're starting to see the growth of anti-Semitism. That's not a positive development, right? I don't think that it's probably not good to mindlessly support the government of Israel, but on the other hand, it's not good to be anti-Semitic. I don't think we want that. I don't want that. And Tucker Carlson, he's recently, he's apologized to the Muslim community. Oh, in the past, I was what do you say? He's Islamophobic. He's apologizing. He says, the the migrant issue, and this is what he's saying recently. Europe needs Muslim migrants, according to Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson's insinuating that maybe England doesn't have enough Muslim migrants. They benefit England so much. And he admires Sharia law. He admires Hamas. You don't hear him saying, he thinks that persecution of Christians in Nigeria, where hundreds of thousands are being slaughtered for the faith, is not significant. It's not worthy of our attention. So there's other things he's done. Like I said, he believes in Sharia law now. So it's obvious that Tucker Carlson's bought out by the... Just think about it, from his he's making millions of dollars on Fox News. He's fired, and he wants to keep the gravy train, the money train, flowing. And if the Saudi Arabians, the Qatari are going to give him money to promote Islam, he'll take it. He'll do it to appease his financiers, his patrons. And these are terrorist states. There's many other pro-Islamic comments that he's made recently that I found very, very disturbing. But I think it's pretty obvious that Tucker is a spokesperson or propagandist for Islam at this time. But his anti-Semitism, that's not a positive development. But one thing that bothered me about evangelicals blindly and mindlessly supporting Israel, this is crazy, but this is going on right now. Israel just said that what's going on is there are some Christians in India, and I guess in the 1800s, these people became Christian like Baptist. And someone's convinced these people are saying, "Oh, you're actually Israelite. You're the tribe of Manasseh. You're B'nai Manasseh." So the Israeli government is giving these people money to renounce Christianity, to convert to Judaism, so they can make what they call Aliyah, where they get a free trip. Think about it. They're going from Israel's a nice country. I've been there. It's a first world country. So you go from a third world to a first world country. All you have to do is renounce Jesus Christ, convert to Judaism, and one of the stipulations is the Israelis, they want to settle them in an area in the north, I guess, where they need people. See, that's why the Israelis, they're not having, a lot of kids. The Muslims, their population's declining too, but they're having more children than, it's a demographic things, right? So the Jews are having less children, the Muslims, the Arabs are having more. So the Israelis are concerned, and they need to bring in immigrants. So what bothers me about, I guess these people in India, this little region, they're free to, I believe in religious freedom. I think it's horrible to deny Jesus Christ for money. But that's what's going on. But the problem was with me, the thing that I found so shocking and offensive about it is because you had this International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, and they're putting these commercials on Christian radio. It's like, give us money and help us bring the tribe of Manasseh back home to their ancient homeland. These people are not the tribe of Manasseh at all. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's like, well, they believe in the one God. Of course, they're Christians. They believe in they use the Old Testament. It's like, of course they use the Old Testament. These are Christian. So what I'm saying is that these Israeli and Jewish organizations were raising money to pay people to renounce Jesus Christ and convert to Judaism, so that they can settle a region. I guess that there's a lot of Hezbollah rocket attacks, and so Israelis don't want to live there, so they want to bring these fake Israelites, But Israel's free to do that if they want to. I think it's kind of appalling. I'm against it, But the gall, the sheer audacity to raise money from evangelical Christians and Christians across America to have the money to pay people to renounce Jesus Christ and to convert to another religion. It's shocking and appalling, but that's the whole thing with that is they're looking for the lost tribes of Israel. Like you have the community in Ethiopia that they used to call them the Falasha. Now they're calling them Beta Israel. I forget what tribe they say they belong to, but that is an ancient Jewish community, and I think scholars think that what happened is that community as well, but over 1,000 years ago, started out as Christian. And they got into Jewish roots, if you will, and they think that a lot of because they use the Old Testament, the Ethiopian Christians do. That's speculative. It's possible that these are just as a Jewish community. In Arabia used to be a lot of, before Islam, there were Arab communities, clans and tribes were Jewish Arabian tribes. So it's very possible that in Ethiopia You also had tribal and affiliations that were Jewish and communities. So with the Beta Israel or the Falasha, perhaps those people. And then the other thing about Ethiopia has a very strong Jewish tradition where the Christians there believe that they're the descendants of King Menelik, the son of Solomon, and that the Ark of the Covenant was smuggled down to Ethiopia. They have there's a lot of a Jewish identity, I guess, or character. There's a lot of Jewish characteristics in Ethiopian Christianity, like using the Book of Enoch and things like that. So there's a lot of Jewish customs and traditions embedded in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. But at any rate, let's just say, okay, there's the Ethiopian Jews. What are they? So they get some rabbis. It's like, okay, our demographics don't look good. Muslims are having bigger. They did not want to bring the Falasha Jews or the Beta Israel. They didn't want them to. It was racism. They didn't want black people. It's terrible, but when they originally started Israel as a nation, there were a lot of Israelis who did not want to recognize the Ethiopian Jews as authentically being Jewish. But finally, so they delayed them. It's like, hey, we're Jewish. We want to come to Israel. No, you're the wrong color. That's what happened. But then, then these, look at the charts. It's like, the Muslims are having larger families. We're having smaller families. We need to deal with this trajectory. We need an infusion of more Jews. It's like, out of necessity, we're going to have to overcome their racial identities. They're pressed upon to do this because it's like, we need more Jews. We're going to have to just hold our nose and let the black Jews of Ethiopia come into to Israel and give them the rights to do that, which is, I think those racial attitudes they had, which is, I'm not making this stuff up. It's disgusting, but they waited decades before they allowed Ethiopian Jews because they're the wrong color. But are the Ethiopian Jews? Like I said, there's a lot of speculation where they came from. Some people think that they originally started out as Christians who were infatuated with the Jewish roots of the faith, and they just eventually became more and more Jewish until they renounced Christ. That's what some scholars think that they are. Because they use the same Old Testament. But who knows? Maybe they are. Maybe the black Jews of Ethiopia are from one of the 12 lost tribes. So the idea is that, these 12 northern tribes wandered around the world and they've disappeared and you have to search out and find them. But he makes a very interesting comment here. He says, well, we should look for them where the Bible says they were settled. So most scholars would say, well, what happened to 10 lost tribes? They just intermarried with the local people. And that, if that's true, which is the most likely explanation, that means that the Assyrians probably do have some blood from the Israelites. That would be the implication, would it not be? And like I said, according to him, that's the traditions they have. So he has a whole chapter. I'm not saying he's right. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying that he was convinced that, I would say, you're just being objective and thinking about reasonably, it's like, okay, we know that these 10 lost tribes were settled in Assyria. The most logical explanation is that, the apostles converted them, right? Preached to them, Thomas and Thaddeus and Mari, and they became Christian and they intermarried with the Assyrians who are converted because they're one people in Christ now. And but he thinks that no, these are the Nestorians or the Assyrians are actually they're direct descendants of the 10 lost tribes, and that's his theory. You have to understand that Asahel Grant. You got to recognize this is a great man, but that doesn't mean he's right about that. I'm just saying that's his theory. He tries to put forth a compelling case. It's very interesting and thought provoking, but he doesn't just leave it there. He looks at Bible prophecy. And the way he looks at it, it's like, okay, he in his own mind, he's convinced that the Assyrians are the descendants of the 10 lost tribes. So he says, what does that mean prophetically? And he has this, the idea of the Islamic Antichrist. Now, there's a Palestinian Christian named Wally Shubat who started talking about this. And I think, was it Joel Richardson? I read his book about Babylon. And it's very possible that the religion of the Antichrist is Islam. And a lot of that, like what they do at the Kaaba is those are pagan rituals that the pagan Muhammad with the satanic verses, he tried to entice the Quraysh and other tribes to follow him by appeasing them, by allowing them to worship the three daughters of Allah, Alat, Aluza, and Almanat. So like all the rituals, the Kaaba is a pagan temple. The black stone could very well be the black stone of the Roman Emperor Elagabalus, where they had this, it's called a Daedalus stone, right? Most pagan temples in the ancient Near East had meteorites or strange shaped stones, not necessarily, they had idols as we conceive of them, but they also had just holy stones, like similar to what you see in Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones the Temple of Doom movie with the Shankara stones, the Shiva Linga. That's the same practice you had in the ancient Near East. So anyway, there's a lot of pagan practices in Islam, a lot of prophetic symbolism that can apply to Islam. So he believes that, he predicts that in this book correctly, that God had protected the Assyrians, but perhaps the hedge of protection could be removed and the Assyrians could be left to the mercy of their enemies. And he's saying right now we look at the Kurds as just brigands and thugs, but it's possible that he's warning of a danger that they could become a formidable force if they started working with the Turks. And if there is a Turkish-Kurdish alliance, the Assyrian people would be in danger and could be forced out of their mountain fortress, basically. Geographical fortress, not a literal fortress. That happened. So that's very interesting as well. So he talks about Bible prophecies and how it could affect the Assyrian people in the last days. And in the end, he talks about the Yazidis, and he's talking about a lot of, there was Mount Sinjar, things that we were familiar with what happened in our time during ISIS. It's kind of interesting. And then he also briefly talks about the missions of the Assyrian church in Mongolia and China. And lastly, he talks about the Jewish community. So this is a very, very important, interesting, and thought-provoking book. And you also have the idea of, we got Isaiah 19:25 about the rebirth of Assyria as a nation. But in Isaiah 14, we have people look at the Babylonian and Assyrian style. This is not the Assyrian people. This is the king, right? The pagan king, which could be seen as perhaps a prophecy of the Antichrist. So it's interesting. And he looks at different prophecies and how they might play out in the future, dealing with the Assyrians. And I'm not a prophecy teacher. It's not my main area. I guess it's important. Jesus says, you know how to read the signs of the sky. You should look at the signs of the time. My main interest is historical, and biblical and historical. But the Bible includes prophecies, so perhaps it's interesting to look at his interpretations of these prophecies. But of course, it's connected to his identification of the Assyrian people as the 10 lost tribes. And like I was saying, he's claiming, and he lived there among these people, and had very good, positive relations with the Assyrian people, that the Assyrians themselves thought that they were descended from, and he uses the term, he calls them Nestorians, but he mentions that the Nestorians don't like being called, their homeland is Assyria. He says that a lot in this book, in the land of Assyria, where they are from. But he acknowledges that the Assyrians don't like to be, they call themselves Nestorian, but that's not, they object to it with objection. Lastly, one more thing he talks about in this book is the Catholic Church trying to take over the Assyrian Church of the East. Page 282. The Romanists, that means the Roman Catholic Church, are at the present moment making great efforts to bring about such a result, which is consuming, hostile takeover of sorts. They want the Assyrian Church of the East, right? So that's their objective. The Romanists are at present time making great efforts to bring about such a result, which is consuming. They want the Assyrian Church of the East to become Roman Catholic. And they have in my hearing spoken with confidence of the ultimate success. The Pope is sending out his emissaries, and the numbers are now in the field or on its borders, preparing for a new and vigorous onset with the avowed object of bringing over the whole Nestorian Church to the papal faith. But the great body of the Nestorians have for centuries manfully resisted their attacks, and are still standing firm at their posts, supported by the strong entrenchments of the Bible. And it would seem that they only need more of the armor of God to enable them to withstand all the fiery darts of the Catholics attacking them, and trying to incorporate the Assyrian Church into the Roman Catholic Church, which would mean it's conversion, right? They're trying to convert, and I mean the end of the Assyrian Church of the East. Of course, the Catholic Church have their own Chaldean Catholic Church, which is not the Assyrian Church of the East. It's a modified, transformed. So he was warning us very aggressive attacks against the Assyrian community by the Roman Catholics, which is continuing to our own day. And who knows? I think that the Catholics have found a way to break the Assyrian people and the Assyrian church's defenses against their attacks. So pretty soon, I mean, the way things are going, the only thing stopping them, I think, is the ancient Church of the East, the old calendars, because they don't want any holdouts, right? They want to take over the whole church in one fell swoop, the whole Assyrian church. Bam! No more Assyrian Church of the East anymore. So they've been working at it for a long time. He's over there watching and noting the schemes and devices of the Roman Catholics against the Assyrian Church of the East in his own day in the 1800s. So it's a very important book, and very thought-provoking. So, like I said, most scholars, it's like, what happened to 10 lost tribes? Well, and he mentions that too. It's like, well, they just intermarried and, with their surrounding Assyrian neighbors, and that's probably what happened. But he thinks that in his own day, it's interesting, Assyrians, yes, we are descended from the 10 lost tribes. I don't know. It's interesting, something to think about. And like I said, he tries to offer a compelling, it's not provocative, very, very least, but I think that are there distinctive 10 lost tribes out there? You never know. But now, I mean, people have tracked down, anthropologists track down every group of ethnicity. Now we have genetics as well. I wonder if they could. It might be hard to track that genetically, right? Could you track with the Y chromosome that men have, and only men have the Y chromosome, but you also have mitochondrial DNA. With mitochondrial DNA, you can trace your mothers all the way down. You got genetic Adam and genetic Eve. Now, genetic Adam and Eve, genetic Eve are not the Adam and Eve of the Bible. That's just what geneticists call them. But there's one man all men are descended from, and I guess there's one woman all people are descended from. And you can, looking at somebody's genetic, scholars are able to reconstruct, because there's so many samples around the world, the genetic past, somebody's genetic history, all the migrations of people, that where they came from, where they migrated to. But with Israel, it'd be kind of difficult, right? Because they're from the same region, the Middle East. You have this tribe that went and settled in Canaan and went back. I think it'd be very difficult to trace any Hebrew or lost tribes. Plus, where did Abraham come from? Babylonia, and he migrated to Syria, and he went to Canaan from there. And then Jacob, where does he get his wives from? From Mesopotamia. So that's where these people came from anyway. But yeah, it's very interesting and thought-provoking. If you don't agree with his conclusions, there's ideas, there's conjectures, there's contentions. This is still a significant part of a Assyrian Church of the East. And this man, he's a kind of a adventurer, exposing himself to great danger. And I mean, he did it out of love for the Assyrian people, and a lot of the information which he wrote about in his book is very historically significant. So I remember I was visiting with Dr. Polisi, and he had this book on his shelf. I should have taken a copy of it and it's a consequential book. Like I said, even if you don't agree with all of his conclusions. First, about his adventures among the Assyrians. Secondly, his arguments to them being the 10 lost tribe, and then what that means prophetically, but then also having just as records of how the Assyrian people were living and the situation, historical context, which he ministered to them as a medical missionary. So, it's an important book. If you're interested in the history of the Assyrian Christian people, I think this is essential reading. So, and if you're interested in Bible prophecy, check out some of his arguments. I have to start, because you got John Bucco, who did the Assyrians, a Forgotten Nation, Bible prophecy, and then we have Ron Susek's book on Assyria, the Assyrian prophecy. And I don't really feel comfortable writing about or teaching about prophecy. It's not, like I said, it's not my main area of interest. But perhaps there's something to it, and it should be explored and studied, considered. So join us for more programs. Please like, share, and subscribe. And you can support my work by getting some of my books, like these books on Mar Adai here. So stay tuned for upcoming programming. Thank you, and God bless you.
Research, rescue, and restore. Help Voice of the Word and Aramaic Christian Ministries mission research the ancient languages, peoples, lands, cultures, and times of the Bible. Rescue persecuted Assyrian Christians in the Middle East and restore Christianity to its original Semitic roots. For Stephen Missick's books, online giving, and other resources from Aramaic Christian Ministries, visit www.stephenmissick.com. Join us next time on Voice of the Word as we research the Scriptures, rescue persecuted Christians, and restore the church to its Semitic roots.